Y'all like good news? I like good news. We've been following this scenario in the Diocese of Charlotte, North Carolina, with Bishop Martin, who has been bishop about a year now. The diocese reportedly went from 9 traditional Latin masses to 4. And then there was the big dust up where he said, look, I am closing down all 4 diocesan Latin masses to implement Traditionis Custodes by Pope Francis to get rid of parish traditional Latin masses. I'm going to move you trads out of the city, and we're going to give you an old Protestant worship center, and we're going to spend reportedly $700,000 converting that Protestant worship space into a traditional Latin Mass Catholic venue. That's $700,000. I don't understand why you'd spend that much to move everybody out of the city. It looked like persecution, and there was a giant outcry, not just in the United States, but globally, because this looks like a crackdown, a straight up persecution. And not only that, but Bishop Martin, there was a leaked document of his plans to restrict the Novus Ordo Mass. No candles on the altar, no crucifix on the altar, no Latin in the Novus Ordo, even though Vatican II says Latin is to be retained, and all sort of draconian impositions on the Novus Ordo. And so this has become ground zero for an unfortunate liturgy war. But we have good news today. Bishop Martin was going to shut these down starting July 8th, and he has now announced a delay. And as you saw in the title of today's podcast, I think it has something to do with Pope Leo, because Pope Leo recently met with Cardinal Roche, who's in charge of worship, liturgy, and sacraments. And in conjunction with that meeting, we now have a revision by Bishop Martin saying, I'm going to delay this. And he adds, if Pope Leo gives further instructions, I'll correspond to those instructions, which has everybody, like myself, excited, thinking maybe Pope Leo met with Cardinal Roche and said, hey, what is going on in America, my home country? The internet, the blogs, the podcast, everybody's commenting on this crisis in Charlotte. This is the last thing we need in the first month of my pontificate. Put in a call. I'm just speaking hypothetically here. This is my dream scenario. And Cardinal Roche says, yes, Your Holiness. Yes, I will take care of this. And then Cardinal Roche gets on the phone and calls up Bishop Martin and says, what's going on, man? He goes, I'm just trying to do the spirit of Vatican II. I just ordered, 1 million yards of felt. We're going to make felt banners, and we're going to make felt vestments, and we're going to have no Latin. And I got lots of acoustic guitars and keyboards and projector screens. And we're just ready to rock and roll with the springtime here. And Cardinal Roche says, look, I just met with Pope Leo. He's not happy with this. All right. I think something's going to happen. I think you need to pause this, let these trads stay in place. And again, Cardinal Roche, they're going to reassign the prefects for the dicasteries. Cardinal Roche is thinking, man, I don't want to lose my job here as prefect, the dicastery. You got to button this up. He's like, oh, yeah, yes, Your Eminence, I'll take care of it. And so we get the news. It's reported from my friend Diane Montagna. She says, just in, restrictions to the traditional Latin Mass in the Diocese of Charlotte have been paused until October 2nd. Bishop Martin has announced in the interim, Bishop Martin said, should the Vatican issue any official changes to Traditionis Custodes, the diocese would abide by those instructions, end quote, Catholic News CLT reported. Earlier today, Pope Leo XIV received an audience, the prefect for the Dicastery for Divine Worship, Cardinal Arthur Roche. It is unknown if the Charlotte TLM restrictions were discussed. So we don't know that. But in my scenario, I think Pope Leo says, knock this off. We don't need this right now. Take a chill pill, get Bishop Martin on the phone, and tell him you need to delay this till October 2nd. And then I, Pope Leo, will handle it. And that's why I think it's so interesting if you look at this part right here. It says, should the Vatican issue any official changes to Traditionis Custodes, the diocese will abide by those instructions. My hope, me reading between those two lines right there, my hope is something was communicated to Bishop Martin. Hey, there's going to be a modification. There's going to be further instructions. Take the chill pill, relax, see if you can get a refund on all the felt banners you just ordered because they may not be needed. Don't spend $700,000 outside the city to renovate some bum Protestant property into a trad mass micro chapel. And so time has been bought. July 8th has now been kicked down the road to October 2nd. But it's not all over. I also saw this today, and it just breaks my heart to see that we are not out of the weeds. Oh, here's Cardinal Roche. Michael Haynes reports, Pope Leo XIV received Cardinal Roche an audience this morning for the first time in his pontificate, at least officially. It marks the first papal audience of Cardinal Roche has had since mid-December. And we also have to remember that Cardinal Roche and Pope Francis seem to have fallen out. There was a lot of interaction with them, and then not so much. You might say, well, that was because Pope Francis got really sick. But also it seems that Pope Francis and certain people in the Vatican felt that Cardinal Roche was pushing and shoving too much on this liturgy war, what's become a liturgy war. Michael Haynes also reports, as with all heads and secretaries of the Roman Curia, Cardinal Roche was temporarily reinstated. And that's supposed to all be revealed this fall. And it might align with this October 2nd new deadline. But as I just mentioned before, some of the sad news is we have another traditional Latin Mass shut down. And I tweeted this out on X. I said, this is hard to watch in real time. We hope and pray that Pope Leo the 14th intervenes. And it says another Latin Mass canceled. Father Dylan Schrader, who I've seen on social media, I've never met him, pastor of St. Joseph in Westphalia, Missouri, has announced that their Vatican permission to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass has not been renewed, despite former Bishop McKnight being granted permission twice before. So we've seen some extensions by bishops, and they're kind of coming to their expiration date. All eyes look to Rome. All eyes on Rome. All eyes on Pope Leo. Is there something happening this year? It would have to be before October 2nd. Is this the moment in which Traditionis Custodes is overturned? A lot of people ask me this. Do you think we go back to Summorum Pontificum? Do we have just a complete striking of Traditionis off the record? And let me just back up. In case you're not familiar with these documents, in 2007, Pope Benedict XVI released a document called Summorum Pontificum. In that document, he said that every priest of the Roman Rite, every priest can celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. There's no condition there, get permission from your bishop. Every priest, starting in 2007, could celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. But wait, there's more. Pope Benedict XVI also stated that the traditional Latin Mass was never abrogated. It was never abolished. This is a retroactive acknowledgement that all the priests from 1970 all the way up to 2007 who continued to say the traditional Latin Mass, we think here of just older priests, devout priests who enjoyed it, the Society of St. Pius X, they were not breaking canonical law because that Mass, according to Benedict XVI, Supreme Pontiff of the Church, that Mass was never abrogated. That liturgy was never abrogated. Why? Because of Quo Primum, Pope St. Pius V, who stated that this Mass is in effect in perpetuity. And that has been the argument of traditional Catholics this whole time. We had a consensus. We had that moment in 2007. We saw diocesan priests and diocesan parishes all over the world celebrating the traditional Latin Mass. On weekdays, many of them had a traditional Latin Mass, 1962 Missal Mass on Sundays. It might have been at 2 p.m., might have been 11 a.m., 7 a.m., but it was everywhere. We went to the Holy Land. We led a pilgrimage with New St. Thomas Institute, with Father Hallwell. This was during the Summorum Pontificum. This was during Francis, but before Traditionis Custodes. We went to every shrine in the Holy Land. We went to the Chapel of the Annunciation. We went to the place of the Visitation. We went to Bethlehem, the place of the birth of Christ. Every single one of the joyful and sorrowful mysteries, and 3 of the glorious mysteries, actually 4 of the glorious mysteries. We went to every place, and we had the traditional Latin Mass, and no one could stop us. They may not have liked it, but Summorum Pontificum was on the book. We had the privilege, the allowance, the right to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass wherever we went. And then Pope Francis issued Traditionis Custodes, and he cut all of that away. Seminarians could not be taught the traditional Latin Mass unless a priest received a dispensation, which had to be done in consultation with the Holy See. They couldn't have traditional Latin Masses. And moreover, traditional Latin Masses at parishes were to be discouraged. And then given this time frame, bishops asks for extension for them to all be phased out. And this goes back to my theory. You've been hearing me talk about it since probably 2018, corral theory. You know, down here in Texas, we have corrals. We have animals, cows. I have cows. You push them into a corral. You close the gate, they're all there. If you need to feed them hay, if you need to brand them, whatever you need to do, they're corralled in. And I've been saying, I think it was the strategy of the St. Gallen Mafia, of the modernists, and of Pope Francis to push the trads into a corral and close the door and see them out there with the SSPX, imperfect communion, partial communion, maybe 2 clicks to the right better than the Eastern Orthodox, but not really part of our system. And we could have ecumenical dialogue with them and maybe let them use a pilgrimage church every once in a while, but they would be sort of the redheaded stepchildren. No offense to all the redheads. I got redheaded kids. Not stepchildren, but children. They'd be sort of the outcasts, ecumenical dialogue, overtures, but they wouldn't be our problem anymore. They're gone. Now, Pope Francis did not live long enough, if that was the strategy, to see that brought to completion. And now we're seeing Pope Leo, and there's a lot of people divided over Pope Leo. I'm still an optimist. I'm still giving him the chance. I believe the graces in the office. I believe he is the true Pope. I submit to him as the true Pope. I'm praying for him. I'm praying rosaries, fasting, praying in the morning for him. Talked yesterday how when I pray the rosary, I think of him along in the mysteries, making intercession for him, because I know he needs it. I know he's surrounded by a pack of wolves. There are people who want to manipulate him. I'm hoping that he looks across the world and he sees traditional Catholics have filial devotion to him, to the Holy See, to the Mass, to the sacraments. They are, there's some odd ducks. I know there's someone out there, well, I met some trads and they were mean. I met some Novus Ordo people and they were mean. Karens. But for the most part, I would say 98.346 of them are kind people who are trying to be Catholics, who are trying to live the vocation of marriage, of family, to raise children in the faith, to be generous by having many children. These are people who are an asset, who have value in the church, and they have true devotion to the papacy. And we've been told under Pope Francis that trads are schismatic, they're sedevacantists. There's plenty, you can go all over the podcast, and Taylor Marshall's a sedevacantist, he's a schismatic, he's a Protestant, he's a Jansenist. I think if you spend time with me here in the podcast, you realize that's not the case. When I wrote Infiltration, it ends with a huge white pill. Don't leave the church. Don't become Eastern Orthodox. Don't become a sedevacantist. Don't become a Protestant. Don't become an atheist. Stay in the bosom of Holy Mother Church. If you've read Infiltration, you know that's what I teach. That's what I talk about. Well, yeah, Taylor, but you talked a lot about like scandals and like bad people in the church. Yeah, that's because that's happened. You can't honestly look at me and say there haven't been financial scandals, sexual abuse scandals, dogmatic scandals, liturgy scandals, Eucharistic abuse over the past 60 years. No one, even the most liberal person in the world, cannot deny that this is the case. That's the message of Infiltration. The message of Infiltration is not that the Catholic Church is bad. The message of Infiltration is the church is good, holy, true, beautiful. She's the bride of Christ. But there's been an infiltration of wolves in our midst. People who do not believe the Catholic faith in leadership positions, in seminaries, in dioceses, in curial positions. And over time, they have harmed souls and eroded away the Catholic distinctives, the true dogma. I think, and by the way, if you want to get a copy of Infiltration, get it on Amazon, Audible, or you can get a signed copy at patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. I think we're at a turning point. You know, Francis was moving, you know, he was sprinting, making changes, and people were trying to keep up with him. And then Pope Leo came and everybody stopped and we're taking a breather like, and we're wondering, did we just run a half marathon or are we set up to have to run a full marathon? That's what I'm thinking. Is that what you're thinking? Is this a half marathon or a full marathon? And at the moment, I think we might be at a half marathon. I think we can take a break. We can have a breather, get a cup of cold water, maybe eat a nice cold, juicy orange. That's always the best thing after you do a long run. Cold, juicy orange, citrus. So refreshing. You don't need Gatorade. You need an orange. And, you know, sit down on the park bench, have a breather and say, okay, maybe things are going to get better. And today, I think we have a signal that things are going to get better. Bishop Martin, for some reason, his guardian angel tapped him on the shoulder. Cardinal Roche called him. Maybe Pope Leo called him. Maybe he got a text. Hey, Bishop, take a chill pill. Quit pushing this agenda. Quit politicizing the liturgy, politicizing the Mass. You know, people will say, oh, those trans, they're just obsessed with Latin and medieval piety. That's not it. That's not it. If you get to know us, that's not it. We're not obsessed with Latin. We are obsessed with Jesus Christ. We are obsessed with the Mass, not as a community banquet, but the Mass as the true propitiatory sacrifice and oblation of Jesus Christ to the Father in and through the Holy Spirit. And we sense that in many parishes throughout the world, that emphasis, that signification, that reality has been lost in places. People dancing around the altar, you know, clown shows, rainbow flags, you know, 8 announcements, prayers of the faithful that read like the Democratic Party talking points. Not an emphasis on the transcendent, not an emphasis on the real presence of Jesus Christ, not an emphasis that this is an oblation to the Father. So the obsession with the traditional Latin Mass, honestly, is just Catholic people that want the Mass to be the Mass, not a Protestant prayer service, not a community feel-good experience with music that sounds like Broadway musicals. Let me revise that. Off-Broadway musicals. That's the problem. So I think we're in a moment of great hope. I also think, before I go to live chat, I also think that the bishops of the world, and particularly the American bishops, have watched this show, this fallout, and said, man, the lay people are charged up. You know, this is not just a Taylor Marshall or Michael Matt remnant. You know, this is not just Bishop Athanasius Schneider. This has become a mob. This is a huge international group of people who are saying, quit persecuting, quit restricting. Let us be. Let us worship God in the way that our grandparents and our great-grandparents worship God. And we want to be faithful to you. We don't want to be Sedevacantists or Eastern Orthodox. We want to be Roman Catholics under Pope Leo XIV. Let us exist. That's it. All right. So we're going to go to live chat now. Our sponsor today is Liver Health Formula. And you've heard me talk about it before. A staggering 100 million Americans now suffer from an overworked and sluggish liver. According to the American Liver Foundation, that's nearly 1 in every 3 people. And if you're ready to reclaim your vitality, I highly recommend giving your liver the support it desperately needs from Liver Health Formula from our sponsor, Pure Health Research. This cutting-edge supplement combines 11 powerful, clinically proven natural ingredients to detoxify and rejuvenate your liver at the cellular level so that you'll experience more energy and an optimized metabolism. And the company has already helped more than 2 million Americans in its time that you joined their ranks and got back to feeling your best. So there's a special offer just for my audience. If you use the discount code Taylor at checkout, you'll receive a 35% discount. You can go to purehealthresearch.com or click the link in the show notes or use the QR code on screen. Just make sure you use the promo code Taylor, Taylor, when you check out at purehealthresearch.com. Again, purehealthresearch.com and enter discount code Taylor, Taylor, to receive a 35% discount. Take the first step towards better liver health and a more vibrant living today at purehealthresearch.com, promo code Taylor. All right, I'm going to go to your questions and comments, your super chats. Here's today's topic. I want to know from you, do you think Pope Leo put in a call? I know this was a big story. I know that Pope Leo, when he was Cardinal Prevost, was active on social media. He's active on X. He has spoken about Catholic blogs and podcasts. He is aware of this space. There's no way, being an American pope, probably our first pope ever to be plugged into social media, there's no way that he hasn't heard about this controversy in the United States of America. He knows the American landscape. He knows our terrain. He knows that America has the most traditional chapels, parishes, mass centers in the whole world. It's part of our ethos. It's part of our identity. We might be small. I know people say, well, you're 1 or 2%. Granted, not huge. 1 out of maybe 100 Catholics in America consider themselves to be traditional Catholics or have some kind of devotion in attending the traditional Latin Mass, either all the time or when they can. Still, 1 out of 100, when you think about only 20%-ish of American Catholics are actually going to Mass every Sunday, at that point, the numbers of weekly Mass goers for the traditional Latin Mass, our percentage is actually quite high. And you've seen that. You've seen that it's a vocal movement. You've seen that there is a mob. And I don't mean mob in like a violent, nasty way, but it's a big group of people. And the voice has echoed louder and louder. Pope Leo has seen this. Pope Leo XIV, His Holiness, he does not want a liturgy war in the first 30 days of his pontificate. especially back home in America. And within the first week, he was talking about the importance of the Eastern liturgies and how the Eastern liturgies communicate mystery and devotion, dignity, and that we in the West, the Roman Rite, can learn from them. So even there, Pope Leo is admitting that we in the West, in the Roman Rite, we Latin Catholics, have strayed from the liturgical norms of our forefathers. Part of the answer to that is bringing you want to talk about restricting. We need to restrict the rubrics and the options and the ambiguity in the Novus Ordo so that it's more uniform. The problem is you can go to a Novus Ordo in this town and be like, wow, that was reverent. That was beautiful. The music was good. You go to a Novus Ordo 20 miles away, and it could be completely different. It can be irreverent. There can be Eucharistic abuse. There can be liturgical abuse. You can have a priest changing the words. I've seen that before. I once walked out. This was probably earlier in my Catholic life. I was at a daily mass, and the priest, during the mass, in his preaching and in the gospel and in the canon, would not use the word he or him, right? This was at least 15 years ago, I believe. Would not say he or him. He kept on saying wherever it would be him, he would say Christ. And in the gospel lesson, it said the Son of Man. We hear that in the gospel, Son of Man this, Son of Man that. Instead of saying Son of Man, he said Son of Human. So he was creating a gender-neutral mass. And I thought, here is a priest who's making up his own mass and is not following the translation approved by the church. I was like, this is illicit. This is wrong. I walked out. You've also heard me tell the story where, again, a long time ago, before I was starting attending the traditional Latin Mass, I came forward to communion. I always try to switch lines back then before I went to Latin Mass and go to the priest. But for some reason, this time I couldn't do that. And I was in a lay Eucharistic minister line. I came forward. I received on my tongue. I don't think I knelt back then. This is pre-traditional Taylor Marshall. But I remember looking at this church, there was no liturgical art. And the Eucharistic minister was wearing a Sesame Street Grover t-shirt. It was a solid blue shirt with the face of Grover, this big on the front of it. And he said, the body of Christ. And I said, amen. And I received, and I realized I'm receiving the Eucharist looking at the face of Grover from Sesame Street. And I was like, why can't I look at a crucifix or mosaics or a statue of the Virgin Mary or a dome with angels and the apostles in it? Something. I'm literally receiving the second person of the Trinity as I gaze into the face of Grover from Sesame Street. And that's when Grover made me a trad. That's when Grover made me a traditional Catholic, because I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't receive communion and look into the googly eyes of a Sesame Street character. It's over. And that's when I found the Fraternity of St. Peter and transitioned my family. We started attending the traditional Latin Mass. Pentecost, 2010, 15 years ago. And that move was not made because I wanted to be a sedevacantis or a schismatic or that I hated my bishop or that I hated the Pope. That move was made because I wanted to receive communion and attend Mass where the priest didn't change the words and where I didn't have to look into the googly eyes of Grover. I think that shows good faith. It shows goodwill, right? And I wasn't angry or mad at the church. I was just like, I need to find a solution to this problem. I love Jesus Christ. I believe in Jesus Christ. I hope in him. I believe in transubstantiation. I believe in the papacy. What is the solution for a man like me, married to a beautiful woman with children? How do I experience Jesus Christ best? And how do I make sure that my children grow up believing in the real presence and transubstantiation in the whole Catholic faith, not pieces of it? For me, 15 years ago, the solution was to drive over to the Fraternity of St. Peter, and start attending the traditional Latin Mass. And it's had a profound positive impact on my life. And through those years, I've been talking about it and encouraging other people to check it out, to look at it. And that movement, especially since COVID, more and more people have discovered it. And it feeds their faith. They grow in their faith. They grow in their devotion for the Eucharist. They have more access to confession often, Eucharistic adoration. And it's been a net positive. And so when people like me and people like you experience that, and then a Bishop Martin comes along and says, banned, we're going to spend $700,000 and renovate a Protestant place and put you trads out in the micro chapel, that is a wound. That's painful. I hope Pope Leo XIV understands what's happening here. All right, these are good people. All right, so do you think Leo made the call? I'm going to jump into our super chats. Robert Lee kicking it off. He says, I wonder if this desire for the traditional Latin Mass is an American thing. This doesn't seem to be an issue in other countries. Oh, Robert, I've been around, particularly in places like France, England. Not so much in Portugal, though I did attend the Latin Mass in Portugal. There's Latin Mass in Italy, not as much. Germany has seen, I think I read the other day, a number of deacons were ordained for one of the traditional orders in Germany. There is something happening, right? I think in America, how am I gonna say this? In America, we're a little bit more maverick. You know, Tom Cruise, Top Gun, a little more maverick, a little more cowboy, a little more John Wayne. You know, I when I go to Italy and I meet people in Italy who watch my podcast, and they're like, you know, you're kind of like the cowboy of the Catholic podcast. You know, it's like, pew, pew, chung, 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 you know, shooting. America has a little bit, and that can be a negative. It can definitely be a negative. It can be there's even a heresy called Americanism, where there is this emphasis on being independent and being isolationist. And that runs against Catholicism. Catholicism is not be a Christian by yourself, be your own island. That's not Catholicism. So that is, I think, a temperament in America, because look, the people who came to America, they were fleeing Europe for a variety of reasons. Some of them came for economic reasons. Some came for religious reasons. We had a war of independence. We had a civil war amongst ourselves. We were in World War I, World War II. It has, by its origin and by its development, had a little bit of a maverick, a little bit of cowboy in it. And because of that, I think there is a self-impetus to say, okay, just like I'm receiving communion and looking at the googly eyes of Grover. This is whack. This is crazy, you know? And instead of just taking it, it's like, well, I got to figure out, I'm going to go somewhere else. I got to figure this out. There's got to be some options here. I think that is one reason why the United States of America has the biggest traditional Catholic movement. I think that might be it. I don't know. I'd be happy to be corrected by y'all. And maybe you think I overstated that. Baron is in the super chat. Go look up Our Lady of Good Success. She, in our current situation in the vocation crisis, when the darkest it will be Our Lady's hour, and she will turn things. Pray. Our Lady will triumph. Our God is hope. Yes, Our Lady of Good Success, approved apparition. She talks about a very dark time in which the priesthood is infiltrated, compromised. The faith of people grows dull. And when everything gets darkest, that's when Our Lady brings the light of her son, Jesus Christ. I wrote a book. It's the sequel to my book, Sword and Serpent. It's called 10th Region of the Night. It's number 2 in my trilogy. I've written a Catholic historical fiction trilogy about St. George and the dragon, and Constantine and St. Helen and St. Nicholas and St. Christopher, and all of them coming together. It's like Lord of the Rings, but actually in history with real Catholic saints. Instead of like magic and sorcery, it's sanctifying grace and relics and bilocation. It's a beautiful book. If you want to read a book that's fast-paced, entertaining, based on history and just based, check out my book, Sword and Serpent. You can get it at Amazon. There's also the Audible version, which is read by Kennedy Hall. He did a great job. It's fantastic. But the second book in that series is called 10th Region of the Night, and it comes from an Egyptian parable about the 10th region of the night. That is the final, darkest, latest, deepest hour of the night. And it's in that hour of the night, this is an Egyptian parable, that the light of truth breaks forth. Now, again, this is not a Christian parable. It's an Egyptian parable. And book 2, by the way, centers on Catholics in Egypt being persecuted. And the central figure is, of course, St. George and St. Catherine of Alexandria, who was a young philosopher lady. And she's beautiful in the book. She's great. Her personality, everything about her is just so amazing. And that's part of the story of St. George and the dragon. When the dragon has consumed almost everyone, when there's no hope, there's nothing left to sacrifice, even to evil. You're in the 10th region of the night. It's the darkest moment. That is when St. George rides in on the white horse. That, in the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, is when Christ appears on his white horse. Did you know that? Christ rides in on a white horse in the book of Revelation. That is the 10th region of the night, the deepest, darkest moment. And Our Lady, in Our Lady of Good Success, says that will happen. By the way, if you haven't read my book, Sword and Serpent, please buy it and read it. I was talking to a friend today. He said, if all of the books of all your books, your 13 books that you've written, weren't published, and only one could be published, which book would it be? I thought long and hard on that. I didn't pick Infiltration. I didn't pick Crucified Rabbi or Eternal City. I said, I think the one book that I'd want to remain as a legacy, Sword and Serpent. It has the most profound theology and morality and lessons for our age. And so, again, if you like the Taylor Marshall podcast, this is a whole different side of me. And I would invite you to get the book and read it and be excited by it. It's a great story. Okay, Bern, thanks for that. Next comment is Beth. She says, off-Broadway music. Yes, that's what the Novus Ordo music sounds like. I've been trying to think of a genre for it for a while. Thank you. Yes. I've done some off-Broadway musical singing here on the podcast to sort of exemplify what it sounds like. Should I try it now or not? Should I make up an off-Broadway song? Let me see here. Let me try to spin something up in my mind. It reminds me of, have you ever seen the film? I think it's called A Mighty Wind. It's a fake documentary, a mockumentary about a man who's sort of a San Francisco lifestyle guy who directs off-Broadway musicals. He goes to this small town and helps them write and create this musical for their town. And it's very cringe, but also very funny. So, the songs are like, I was glad when they told me to take hands with our community. I said, take hands and turn to the other. See Jesus in the eyes of your friend. Turn to the other. Walk down the aisle. 'Cause we are the Eucharistic. We are the Catholic. We are the Church of God. I just made that up. That's what the music often sounds like in some of these parishes. The lyrics are so lame, like turn to one another, look each other in the eye. It's like really bad, like ballads from 1971. I mean, it's kind of post Bob Dylan in its cheesiness, like we are the children of the Lord today. Shake your tambourine and smile on a brother. We are the church today. The church today. And it's cringe. And people under the age of 35 are slowly dying inside. They're like a candle just melting away, drip by drip, every time they hear, we are the people. And it's sad. It's off-Broadway music. says, the word you were looking for yesterday is convalidation. Thank you. I was also thinking of radical sanation. I just had my 24-year civil marriage convalidated. Just found the traditional Latin Mass and would hate to see it go. Thank you, You know, we have a problem in society, and it's a problem about marriage. People don't understand that marriage is a sacrament, that it's indissoluble, that it's a vocation, that marriage is a call to suffer. Yeah, marriage is a call to suffer for another person. And so we have a lot of divorce. We have a lot of people who are married outside the Catholic Church. And instead of saying, well, we're just going to bless irregular unions, and we're going to bless Adam and Steve, and we're going to bless people shacked up, and concubinage, why don't we take all that energy and invest it into teaching the true, beautiful doctrine of Catholic matrimony? If 50% of marriages are ending in divorces, maybe there's an opportunity there. I don't think saying, well, like we learned yesterday, do I have let me see if I have it. I think I have it. The quote from Francis. Yeah, here it is. Second half here. It's a superstition because marriage frightens the husband. It's a superstition we have to overcome. That's good. But here's the bad part, Francis says. I've seen a lot of fidelity in these cohabitations, and I am sure that this is a real marriage. They have the grace of a real marriage because of their fidelity. No, Francis, Pope Francis, you don't have a real marriage if you don't have a real marriage. All right? That's Catholic. And if you're shacked up and you're living in concubinage or cohabitation, you do not have the grace of a real marriage. That's why we were blessed to hear Pope Leo to say, quote, perhaps many young people today who choose cohabitation instead of Christian marriage actually need someone who, in a concrete and understandable way, especially by the example of their life, shows them what the gift of sacramental grace is and what strength it brings. Someone who helps them understand the beauty and greatness of the vocation to love and to the service of life that God gives to spouses, end quote. Last part of that quote was quoting Pope St. John Paul II. That's what we need. That's what we need. So, congratulations on finding the traditional Latin Mass and having your marriage regularized. That's a beautiful thing, and it will bring graces. So many graces to you, your spouse, your children. Super chat from First Knitter, no comment. Super chat from Dr. Mafongo. I take no issue with the traditional Latin Mass. I hope to attend one myself. My only issue is with those who weaponize it and make those attending the Novus Ordo feel less than. I agree with you, Dr. Mafongo. We shouldn't let there be a two-tier system in the Catholic Church. Like the A team, they go to the Latin Mass, and the B team goes to the Novus Ordo, right? If I have ever expressed that or insinuated that, I apologize. I'm sorry for that. There are many people who attend the Novus Ordo who are more holy than I, who pray more than I, who pray more rosaries than me, who sin less than me, and I acknowledge that, right? I cannot deny the fruits of that sanctity, those spiritual gifts that they have. And they draw them from the holy sacrifice of the Mass in the Novus Ordo. And I honor that and I recognize that. But I also say that it's a two-lane street. Generally, the Novus Ordo clergy, and I mean, I'm using these terms, right? And lay people often look askance at tribes and say, oh, they're just obsessed with Latin. Oh, they're stuck in the past. Oh, they're rigid. Oh, they don't know what's going on in the Mass. They just kneel like sheep and thumb their rosaries. They don't participate actively in the Mass. They have an archaic understanding of worship, not like us. And so there is discrimination and there is weaponization also from the Novus Ordo crowd to the traditional crowd. I've lived that myself. All right. I don't think there should be A team Novus Ordo and we tolerate the B team TLM people. You know, we'll give them another 2 or 3 months. We'll give you the Protestant chapel outside the city so we don't have to see you anymore. You B team trads. And then the trads should not also be browbeating the Novus Ordo and saying whatever they're saying, you know. You're lesser. You're not as holy as us. Because the Novus Ordo Mass, I truly believe, is valid. It is the real, true sacrifice of Jesus and the real presence of Jesus. When I go by a Catholic church, even if it's not traditional Mass, I genuflect. I make the sign of the cross. If I'm in the church, I genuflect. Jesus is there. Now, do I think that in the 1960s and the 1970s, there were ambiguities? There were introductions of ideas that caused confusion about those realities? Yes, I do. And that's why I attend the traditional Latin Mass. But I also realize that there's truth and there's reality there as well. So thank you for your super chat. I appreciate that. 1985 Joe says, I think Pope Leo said slow down, but not stop. The traditional Latin Mass ban here in Charlotte is still set for October. Why not nullify that ban outright? Okay, these things take time and you have to get your personnel in place. Pope Leo might already have a replacement set for Cardinal Roche, and he might want to work on that document and implement that with that new staff. You have to understand there's all these dicasteries that have prefects, cardinals over them usually. The Pope works in conjunction with them to implement these things. He might have a plan. He might keep Roche. I hope not. He might have someone perfect lined up. He's going to work with him to formulate the document and the strategy. Part of my frustration, and I was like this day one, and I'm working on myself, but part of the frustration is people were a month into the pontificate, barely. And like, well, why hasn't he done this? And why hasn't he done that? And that's like watching, think of a football team that didn't do so well last semester. All right. And there's a new head coach and there's a new quarterback. And you're in preseason games. You're not even in the season. Like, well, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they blocking there? Why was the receiver over there and not over here? You have to realize that when you have a coach and you have a coaching staff and you have new personnel, it's not like you just flip a switch and you fix it all in the first 30 days. Does that make sense? Is that a good analogy? Same thing with a company. New ownership comes in. People are like, well, why haven't they already updated the bathrooms? Those places are a dump. We've been needing new bathrooms for 8 years. Yeah, and in the break room, that is a mess too. The machines don't work half the time, and the coffee machines always break. How come they haven't fixed the coffee machine yet? And meanwhile, the new ownership may be just trying to get to know the board, the C-suite staff, and then do we need to replace these people? Do we need to train these people? Are they good to go? Are they deceiving us? Are the books honest? How are sales? Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's be patient. Joe says, would you accept a new hybrid Latin English Mass? It's not up to me, but I do not think that's a good reason. For two reasons come to mind immediately. Number one, we live in an increasingly interconnected international world. All right. I'm going to be in Italy next week. When I go to Mass, it's better if the Mass is in Latin. I and my family can fully participate and make the responses. If it's in Italian, I'm just going to sit there. I don't know what to do. I've been to Mass in Italian, but it's not familiar to me. Same is true if I go to Mexico. I know more Spanish than I know Italian, so I could participate more. But when you look at the Roman Rite and how it was traditionally organized as an international community, it's interchangeable. It's not geographically restricted, and it's not restricted by ethnicity. Before Vatican II, you could have a Polish person. I almost said Polak, but I didn't say that. A Pole, a German, Kraut. You could have a Mick, Irish Catholic. They could all go to the same Mass, and it would all work. You could even have a German pre-celebrant, a Mick Catholic deacon, and a Polish subdeacon, and they could all say Mass, even if they don't know each other's language. It worked out. It was beautiful. And yet now we're even more interconnected and more global. So I think having Latin is valuable. And I know someone out there saying, well, I don't know Latin. It's very easy. It's very easy. If you attend church in Latin, everyone attends church in Latin for a year, you got it. You got it. Well, that's a year. Well, just think about it. In antiquity, people were baptized as babies and they grew up in it, and it was just part of the air they breathed. It's not like they were sitting there like bumps on the log for 80 years of their life. Like, I wish I knew what was going on in this church, and just staring at a stained glass all day. Those people were going to Mass every Sunday. Those people believe in transubstantiation. Those people really believe the Catholic faith. You can't tell me that because there was Latin, they didn't understand the faith. They believe more than we believe in our current culture and had better Mass attendance. So the second reason why I don't think it's a good idea. Oh, also you have these racial divides. So you have a parish, 8 a.m. Vietnamese Mass, 9:30 a.m. Spanish Mass, 11:45 English Mass, right? And the parish does not intermingle. There's not a community there. It's segregated by language. And when I go to the traditional Latin Mass, I see people from all different ethnicities. I see people from Africa. I see people from India. I see people from Mexico. I see a lot of white people. We're all in there praying together in the same tongue, and we're integrated. Right? So it's not like you have the white Anglo-Saxon Mass and then the Mexican Mass. So I like that about it as well. And then the second reason why I like Latin is, for all intents and purposes, dead. It's not evolving. It's not changing. So when we talk about Jesus is consubstantial with the Father in the Creed, the word substance and substantial is hardened. Whereas if I say to you the word substance in English, you could think of substance abuse like drugs. Like when I say substance, you're like, oh, you're talking about drugs, right? I could talk about substance and you might think a chemical compound. Or I could be talking about substance as in the metaphysical sense of a substance, which is more of a Roman Latin idea, the original meaning of the word. English is more slippery. We saw that in some of the translations. The Lord be with you and also with you. Is that really what it should be? No. Instead of saying that Christ, the Son of God, is consubstantial with the Father, which is the Latin, for many years in the Novus Ordo, they said one in being with the Father. That's not actually quite correct in the translation. And so you're constantly going to be fighting vernacular languages and translations. And you're going to be updating the language of the Mass and of the Psalms and the prayers every 10, 15, 20 years. Is that really what you want? And if you look at the history of heresy, look at the Nestorian controversy, look at the Monophysite controversy, much of that is spent on debating how terms flow back and forth from Latin, Greek, Ge'ez, which is Ethiopian language, Coptic, and Syriac, right? And they're discussing and debating the Trinity, the three persons, the nature of Christ, two natures of Christ, the hypostatic union, all these things. And when you introduce many languages, you get more slippery. And this is why the Catholic Church for centuries has defined, we're going to do theology in Latin, we're going to do liturgy in Latin. Even the Pope is issuing his documents in Latin. It creates something standard, not as slippery. It's more, to use the word I just used, substantial. So I really think part of the problem is people are intimidated by Latin. They think it's like you have to learn Mandarin Chinese to attend Mass. And it's really not that. Again, especially if, like, my children have been attending the traditional Latin Mass for some of them their entire life, some of them most of their life. They understand it. Like, we talk about it. But they have been brought up into it, and it's part of who they are. And it's not a negative. It's not a negative. And if you're worried, do not be intimidated. Robert Lee is back. I found Novus Ordo Masses that do chants and hymns in Latin. It is so different. No cell phones, people talking during Mass, weird stuff. It's reverent. Yeah. There are Novus Ordo Masses that have, I've been to them, that have Ad Orientem, Latin, Eucharistic Prayer 1, Roman Canon, Kyrie eleison in Greek, the Creed in Latin, Agnus Dei in Latin. Priests in many places have done heroic things to try to restore the Roman inheritance to the church. And that's a good thing. And I sense that is the direction of Pope Leo. It can't just be give permission for traditional Latin Mass as well. If 99+% of the church is on the Novus Ordo, there also needs to be teaching and clarification and tightening of the Novus Ordo. It's not just like you mail every priest in the world a 1962 missal and the next weekend it's fixed, right? The problem is that big. ITN says, my parish's Lord's Prayer setting is essentially an Irish pub song. Yeah, we don't need that. You know, what we need is this. Pater Noster, qui est in caelis, right? Sanctificetur nomen tuum. The chant. You know, Vatican II said Latin must be retained. So if you're against Latin altogether, sorry. Right? That's not the teaching of the church. Latin must be retained, and Gregorian chant, even polyphony, needs to be retained. Any bishop who's saying no more Latin, no more chant, they're actually against Vatican II. We're at the point now in 2025 where the liberals are against Vatican II. That's where we're at. Tyler D. He's got the Sunburst Fender Stratocaster there. Very nice. He says, I'm in the process of converting from Protestantism, and I've learned a ton from you. Thank you for all you do. Well, blessed be God. Thanks be to the Holy Spirit, Tyler. I'm very happy for your journey, and I know that we will be blessed to have you as part of our family. Keep it up. Susie Glaze, are you fluent in Latin? No. I have, in college, I took 4 or 5 semesters of Latin, college Latin. In seminary, Protestant seminary, I took Latin. I took Latin some more when I was working on my doctorate, and I have taught high school Latin. So I know Latin pretty good. I even keep lately, I've had a deck of 1,000 Latin vocab words. In the evening, I kind of look at them, just kind of brush up, keep my Latin vocab strong. I can read a Latin text. In that sense, I would say conversant. I once went to a camp, an adult, for scholars, I guess a scholar camp. It was at Clear Creek Monastery, and it was a Latin camp, adults. And when you arrived at a certain point, you could only speak Latin. And it went over the weekend. And at the end of the weekend, you could speak English again. And this was like an intensive experience. You know, the people there had taken years of Latin like me, but we had never had to say, pass the potatoes, or, you know, what time is breakfast in Latin. And so that experience kind of revealed to me that being able to read Latin and understand Latin and access text is different than being fluent in Latin. And like through that weekend, you know, I learned new vocab words. I had to learn vocab words. And of course, everybody's like, you know, checking the books and trying to say things. Like I remember at one point I wanted to ask someone, they had some cookies. I was going to ask for a cookie. I'm like, what's the word for cookie? You know, I look it up. Crustulum, you know, pass the crustulum. I want a cookie. So it's kind of Sesame Street there. Cookie Monster, maybe. Crustulum monstrum, Cookie Monster. So I think I'm very proficient in it, but I'm not fluent. I could not do this podcast in Latin. John Bosco, the anti-Tower of Babel is Latin. It is how a universal church is possible and will endure forever. To say we get rid of Latin forever is actually against Vatican II. Like it is not the direction we should be on. All right. Latin is permanently imprinted on the Catholic Church. The Pope is the Bishop of Rome, and therefore the Roman language is christened. It is baptized to be our mother tongue. There's I can't remember the name of the book. It's by C.S. Lewis. And at one point, I hope I have this right, going back 20 years now, read it as a Protestant, but at one point, Mother Church appears. Which book is this? Is this C.S. Lewis? I think it's C.S. Lewis. Mother Church appears, and she only speaks Latin. That's her tongue. Isn't that interesting? Even C.S. Lewis understood that the mother tongue of the church was Latin, and he was an Anglican. Scott says, why can't the traditional Latin Mass be performed in the vernacular? I know Latin quite well, but I don't really care if the liturgy is performed in the vernacular. Yeah, I addressed that just a few minutes ago, Scott. I don't know if you're in the show. But there's the international character. So if we do English Mass and Spanish Mass, right, we're all segregated again. There's not the interchange, and we're in an increasingly interconnected global society. So I think it's important. And then we're also the vernacular is not dead like Latin. So we're going to have to constantly be updating the language generationally. And so it becomes more slippery, right? And the fact of the matter is having there's levels here. There's being fluent in Latin. There's being conversant and educated in Latin, where you could read like the Latin Vulgate or St. Augustine in Latin. And then there's being just, what's the right word here? I don't know if proficient is the right word, but I would say capable. Being capable in Latin, right? So all my kids, all the responses, they can say them in Latin. They know what they mean. They can say the creed in Latin. My wife sings the creed every Sunday in Latin. She knows what every single word means. She's never taken one high school or college course on Latin. It is not that difficult, right? Just think if you watched a movie that was in Spanish, and you watched that movie 52 times in 1 year in Spanish. At the end of that year, especially if there are subtitles, like you had a missalette, you're going to have the whole movie memorized. You're going to know every bit of dialogue, right? Think of it like that. And again, everyone's like, we have to have the vernacular. And I'm saying, you're smarter than that. You can do it. It is possible. Illiterate people did this for hundreds of years. It is possible. We don't have to sell ourselves and say, we just have to have the vernacular. I know I'm casting a vision there, but I hope you can follow me. The first knitter says, we should strive to be humble and shun elitist attitudes. This has added fuel to the fire. I do wish everyone could experience the traditional Latin Mass, but not everyone has access. 100%. I'd say one of the most common comments that I get, emails, people reaching out, messages. Hey, I love your show. I love how you say, try to find traditional Latin Mass. The closest traditional Latin Mass to us is 3.5 hours away. What do we do? Right. And I say to them, continue at your local parish, pray for the best, help your priest, do what you can. But at the end of the day, that's it. And by the way, some people move. I encourage that. I think as I'm a father, I'm a husband, I have children. One day I'll have grandchildren, God willing. And I think what is the most important task? The most important task is to get myself to heaven, my wife to heaven, and my children to heaven, eventually my grandchildren to heaven. And one of the solutions in human history for solving deep problems is migration. Every culture on earth has gone through a period of migration because of famine, droughts, invasions, disease, all kinds of situations. People have said, you know what? We're going to pull our stakes. We're going to go move. We're going to go over there. And I think spiritually, we're in a time where if you can do it, not everyone can do it. Not everyone can afford to do it. People have to take care of parents or siblings or children, or they're rooted to a job that can't be moved anywhere else. So I'm not in any way denigrating those in those situations. But if you have a online job, or you're part of a company that has 50 locations in the United States, you can perhaps move, and then you'll be integrated where there's a great Catholic school where your kids are going, and there's a Catholic parish and beautiful liturgy, and your wife now has Catholic friends, and they're praying together and praying the Rosary and meeting, and then your wife is uplifted and she's flourishing, and you as a guy, you're maybe grilling steaks with the fraternity priest and hanging out with guys, and you're being edified and lifted up, and all of that is great, and maybe it's worth the move. I will in this moment recommend, as I always do, Real Estate for Life. They sponsor the show as well, and Real Estate for Life is real estate agents who get you, right? They understand your beliefs, and I know the owner, he's a great guy. And they have helped hundreds of people on this podcast to sell their house wherever they are and buy a house in a different location, not just in America, Canada, Mexico, all over the world. So if you do want to make that migration and move somewhere, I recommend you start at realestateforlife.org, realestateforlife.org. Make sure you tell them you heard about it on the Taylor Marshall Show. They have helped so many people. And so I think that's a real conversation to have with spouses, like, should we move to North Texas, where there's a traditional Latin Mass and a good Catholic school? Maybe that's something we could do. If you have that conversation, I would loop in realestateforlife.org. They can help you, realestateforlife.org. We're over time, but I have super chats here, so we're going to keep on moving on. Wema says, pray the Rosary, fast, and do more penance for the extirpation of all heresies. That includes the NO questionable rites. Yeah, I just want to say the Novus Ordo is valid, all right? But we do need clarity. We do need reverence. Another super chat coming in from iCatholic Mobile. Wow, I just realized we got a big show today. 4,166 people watching live right now. iCatholic Mobile and the super chats nonstop. All right, no more super chats. All right, we're over time, but I'm going to get to all the ones we have so far. iCatholic Mobile, attending the Mass at the Benedictine Abbey, Latin Novus Ordo ad Orientem, kneeling for communion, etc. It was not until later that I realized the gutting of the liturgy itself that differentiates the traditional Latin Mass, not the Latin itself. Yeah, it's not, people often think the Latin Mass is just what the Novus Ordo is in Latin. There's a lot of other differences. As well. So, and you kind of pick up on that after you've been to a Latin Mass about 4 times, you start to pick up on that. You start to figure out the train. Thanks, iCatholic Mobile, another great Catholic company. John Bosco. Had a discussion with a priest last week. I asked if he ever celebrated the Mass in Latin. He said he didn't have a desire to do so. I wonder why. I don't know. Scott Fullerton is back. That's actually good reasoning. As I said, I don't mind the vernacular, but constant updating would be a waste of resources. Yeah. And last super chat here, iCatholic Mobile is back. We are moving the entire company staff to be in a traditional community walking distance from daily Mass. Location undisclosed until property closed. Re-establish Christendom. Yes. Moving can be hard, but, in some cases, I think it could be, the positives outweigh the negatives. So it's something to consider, but I realize people are taking care of sick parents and siblings and children and grandchildren, and moving is not always an option. But if it is, I think it's a great call. All right, I'm going to call off super chats there. I appreciate everybody in the super chats. I appreciate all 4,000 of you watching today. It's a great day. It's a great moment. We've got a pause. We got a hard situation over here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but blessed be God, the bishop is pausing. And he even said, if I get new directives from the Vatican, I'm going to follow those. So it's a bright day. Here comes the sun. All right. Let's just hope that Pope Leo provides that leadership. I know we've been on a long run. I know we're out of breath and we're taking a break right now. Like I said earlier, we're having a glass of just cold water, cold, sweet tea, Texas tea, and a cold, juicy orange. And we're just taking a moment, and we're hoping that Pope Leo is blessed by the Holy Spirit and is rejuvenated in grace. And he sees, you know what? The 1% of traditional Catholics, they love Jesus. They love me, the Pope. They love the Mass. They love the diocese, the local bishops. Let's just let them be. It's going to be all right. And we can stop the liturgy wars. Be great. All right. Pray your rosary every single day. Never stop. Pray your rosary every day. Pray for the Pope. Pray for your bishop. Pray the rosary every day, or you're not on the team. Visit our sponsors today. Our sponsor is Liver Health Formula. Check them out in the link below. Also, I'll mention again, realestateforlife.org. Let them know you heard about it at the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast. Also link below as well. And, I didn't mention this. The new book. I'm really going to ask y'all, we want to start a movement. I want this book to change the public discourse in America and other nations. We need to restore Christian nations, not conservative nations, not just Republican in name only nations, not just being MAGA. We need to be Christian. Christ is king. Christ is first nations. And that's the reason why I've written this new book, Christian Patriot. I'd love for this book to be slingshotted into the public discourse. I'd love for this book to be discussed by Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or PBD. I will be on PBD next month talking about it. But I'd love to change the public discourse, to create a movement, to shift the window. And I'd love for this to be a New York Times bestseller. If we get it to be a New York Times bestseller, it'll make a big splash. And if you pre-order the book, and the link's below, if you pre-order the book, all those sales will hit the first week, and maybe we can hit the New York Times bestseller list. The main point is we got to get it out into public discussion. So it's a great book. I think it'll challenge you. I think it'll teach you a lot about Christian politics from a Augustinian point of view, from a Thomistic, Thomas Aquinas point of view, and I think it will enrich you and encourage you. So pre-order the book, Christian Patriot, link below, christianpatriotbook.com. Until next time, remember, our Lord Jesus Christ says, you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless and Godspeed.